as you said, my talk is looking at the likely adoption of the new IFRS Foundation's proposed sustainability reporting standards. So just to give you a bit of background first, so if anybody has been following this area, you're probably very aware that there's been a lot of increased interest and demand for sustainability and ESG reporting, meaning the environmental, social, and governance reporting. And there's a slight difference between sustainability and ESG reporting. So sustainability is more looking at how does an entity impact on the external environment, and ESG is how do those environmental, social, and governance, how does that impact on the value creation for the company? So it's more investor focused, and sustainability is more multi-stakeholder focused. And over the years, there have been various frameworks and guidelines that have become available. And you probably, if you've in this area, you probably have heard the phrase, the alphabet soup. There's lots of different acronyms out there. But over the last couple of years, there's been this global convergence. Or an attempt to do a global convergence. And there's been the creation of the new International Sustainability Standards Board, the ISSB, which sits under the IFRS Foundation, International Financial Reporting Standards Foundation. So the move with creating this new ISSB and the new standards that they've released is this desire to have less confusion for stakeholders, and to be able to really just have this single framework that's available. So the purpose of this study was to then look at, are companies likely to adopt these new ISSB standards over the current frameworks that they're using, given that there is this different focus. So the ISSB, they have said that their standards are going to be investor focused. So that's ESG reporting type, compared to one of the main frameworks that is out, which is the GRI framework, the Global Reporting Initiative framework, and that's more multi-stakeholder focused. So there are these two main bodies. There's going to be the ISSB and the GRI, who are going to work together, but they are going to have their own separate standards. And so are companies likely to just switch to the ISSB standards, or are they going to still have multiple standards, which is really what the ISSB was trying to avoid happening. In terms of our methodology, we took the top 100 South African listed companies, and that top 100 represents 97% of the market cap on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. So it really does take the majority of our listed companies. And just to give you a bit of context in South Africa, integrated reporting is mandatory for listed companies. So integrated reporting is where companies are supposed to report on the 6 capitals, so financial, manufactured, and intellectual capital, but then also social and relationship, human capital, and natural capital, which would be more sustainability type capitals. So that is mandatory, but there isn't actually any requirement to do sustainability reporting as a separate form of reporting. So we took those top 100 companies, we then did a content analysis, and we looked at what were the latest reports that were available. They're either their annual report, integrated report, sustainability report, or just what was available on the website a year ago, August, September last year. And then we used a keyword search to be able to identify which frameworks they were actually using currently. And some of the frameworks, some of the organizations who issue these frameworks, they allow companies to submit reports as well. So are the companies submitting those reports? So in terms of our findings, this represents then the initial findings that we had. So we looked at 5 different frameworks: the GRI, Global Reporting Initiative; CDP, they were previously known as the Carbon Disclosure Project, but they're just now known as the CDP. And then the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals; TCFD, which is the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, it's quite a mouthful; and then the SASB, the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, that's the US-based board. So these 3, the GRI, CDP, and the SDGs, they're more multi-stakeholder focused, and the TCFD and the SASB, they're investor focused. So looking at these top 100 South African companies, the SDGs definitely have the highest at 73%, companies that say they're actually reporting in terms of the SDGs. Compared to SASB at the far end of the scale, only 17%. But that's not that unusual given the South African environment. And across Africa, the SASB standards aren't that well adopted in the African environment. Whereas the SDGs, there's been a big focus by stakeholders on reporting in terms of those SDGs. So it's not surprising we're seeing that. The TCFD, just so noting that's also quite a high adoption rate there at 55%. The TCFD standards have been used as the starting point for the ISSB standards, and they are very much based on the same framework. They've got 4 areas that the companies need to report on. So we would expect, just looking at this, that probably these 55% as a minimum will change over to the ISSB standards. But given that companies are using all of these other standards as well, is it likely, oh, sorry, check went ahead there. Is it likely that they will switch over? In terms of the orange blocks over here, so the GRI, CDP, and SASB, they allow companies to also submit reports to them. And you can see the GRI, it's quite a low percentage there, but for the other two, CDP and SASB, most of the companies do submit those reports. And the reasons that they would do that is it gives them added level of assurance for the stakeholders, because they're knowing that it's being monitored by an external body. It also just gives them greater exposure as well. And so those companies may not want to change over to ISSB in isolation and not report in terms of these other standards, because then they lose those benefits that they're currently seeing. So again, they might adopt the ISSB standards, but do these in addition, and that doesn't solve the dilemma that the ISSB was trying to solve. We then also just had a look at what are the number of frameworks that each of these companies are using. And if just looking across here, 29% of the 100 companies, they're using 4 frameworks. And another 10 using 5 frameworks, all 5 that we looked at. So about 40% of the companies are using 4 or 5 frameworks. And so with that additional number of frameworks that they're reporting in terms of, there's extra cost in terms of collecting the data, putting together the reports, submitting the data, etc. So this may be a reason for companies to want to rather change over to the ISSB standards if they would be able to reduce their costs. But there's obviously a reason why they're submitting to all these different bodies or reporting in terms of all these different frameworks. And so the ISSB standards, unless they meet all of those reporting criteria that they're looking for, again, they will probably carry on reporting in terms of multiple frameworks, and that doesn't solve the problem that the ISSB was trying to solve. So there may be potential cost-saving benefits, but it's not a guarantee. We then looked at the 2 different classes of frameworks. So we split the total frameworks in terms of multi-stakeholder and investor focus, so that we could see what is the split between that. And so the multi-stakeholder, like I said, that's the GRI, the CDP, and the SDGs. And on the investor focus side, that would be the TCFD and the SASB standards. So although it's 3 versus 2, this difference that we're seeing over here, there's 2.64 on average. Each company on average is using 2.64 multi-stakeholder focused frameworks compared to only 0.72 investor focused standards. And so just that difference of 3 versus 2 isn't going to account for this difference that we see over here. So definitely these South African companies, they are leaning towards using multi-stakeholder focused standards rather than the investor focused standards. And so again, that calls into question then, are they going to adopt the ISSB standards over these multi-stakeholder standards? We also looked at what was the most common combination of standards that we saw. And obviously if they're doing all 5, then it's all 5. But for those companies that are using 4 standards, most of them, 79% of those companies, were using all three multi-stakeholder focused frameworks, and only 1 of the investor focused, the TCFD. Most of them excluded the SASB. So again, a very strong focus on the multi-stakeholder focused frameworks. So will they want to change? Probably they're going to think twice before they change which frameworks they're using. The last bit of analysis that we then did was we split our top 100, and we took the top 10 companies that are included on the FTSE JSE Responsible Investment Top 30 Index. And we said these top 10, they're really going to be the leading companies in South Africa in terms of sustainability, ESG reporting. And so what are they doing in terms of this reporting? Because in terms of institutional theory, we would expect that if the leading companies are doing something, the other companies are likely to try and mimic what they're doing. And so these top when we look at that, 2.54 on average is the total number of standards that they're using on all the companies. The top 10, they're using 3.5 on average. So they're definitely using a much higher number of standards. The cost saving doesn't seem to be a particular issue for them. They're more focused on getting all of this reporting out. But if we then look at their split between multi-stakeholder and investor focused, they are very strongly weighted towards the multi-stakeholder focused frameworks. And so again, if this is what the leading companies are doing, it's likely that the other companies are going to follow suit. And we would expect them to then also carry on doing this multi-stakeholder focused and not just go for the ISSB standards and abandon anything else. So just as a summary then of the findings, so as I've said a number of times, the multi-stakeholder focused frameworks are definitely the most commonly used. And as I did mention, the TCFD and the SASB standards, those have been consolidated into the ISSB, those two bodies. And so the ISSB standards are going to be based on those predominantly. And so it seems likely that given especially the actions of those leading companies that are likely to lead the way, we're going to likely see still companies using the multi-stakeholder focused reporting in addition to the ISSB standards. Because there is a large take-up of the TCFD standards in South Africa, so we'd expect them to switch over to the ISSB standards, but in addition to the multi-stakeholder standards. In terms of areas for further research, definitely as the ISSB standards are becoming available and start becoming adopted, there's definitely going to need to be analysis of the adoption of those standards, and then also expanding to other countries. This was just done in South Africa, but this is an area that is ripe for research. So definitely lots of ideas that can come. These are just two over here, but there's lots to be doing. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to your questions.